Hello and welcome back. My name is Dr. Christopher Gennari, and this is Great Big History Podcast. In this episode, we do Egyptian geography. So we get started with Egypt. Woo! All right, let's get started. Egyptian geography has two parts: the deserts and the Nile. Egypt is a country today that has both of these parts, but in the ancient world, it was really just on the Nile. There's the deserts that are quote-unquote part of Egypt, but no one lived in them. And so Egypt is technically surrounded by deserts: the Libyan desert in the west and the Sinai desert in the east. So you have deserts, and then right through the middle of these deserts runs one of the greatest rivers in the entire world, the greatest river in the ancient world, the Nile. So the deserts provide isolation. They keep people out. You can't cross them. You need water. You really need ships. So they keep people out. And so you don't have invasions. But that means there's limited interactions with other peoples, which means Egypt is behind. For all the wealth Egypt has, its writing comes later than Mesopotamia. Its bronze comes later. Its chariots come much later. The Egyptians are simply behind because they have limited interactions with other people. Now, they do have, we'll talk about, there's two trade connections. There's one in the tip of the delta, the northern part of Egypt, where the Nile enters the Mediterranean Sea. And then there's the cataract, the first cataract. Now, cataracts, spelled C-A-T-A-R-A-C-T-S, C-A-T-A-R-A-C-T-S. Cataracts are blockages like you have on your eyes, right? That's why we use this word. It's a pre-scientific word. And the idea is it's a blockage. And then what it is a blockage in the Nile. It keeps people from moving efficiently down the Nile. Now, also, you have to realize the Nile runs from south to north. It's one of the few rivers that runs from south to north in the ancient world. And so there's really only two places that people, if they want to trade with Egypt, can come. So if you lived in the middle of Egypt, you could go your entire life and never meet a foreigner, never meet a non-Egyptian. And so what the cataracts do is create these divisions of empire, because there's 6 major cataracts on the Nile. And so in between each one is kind of an empire. So Egypt ends at the first cataract. Then there's this frontier zone between the first and the second. It's where a lot of Christian monasteries will be built, where hermits go. If you want to get away from government, you go there, because it's a frontier. At the second cataract to the third cataract is Kush. Beyond that is the kingdom of Meroe. And so between each cataract, between two cataracts, form a division of empire. But the deserts keep people out. The Nile provides life. The Nile provides life. It's the longest river of the ancient world, and it's where Egyptians live. If there's no Nile, there is no Egypt. Even today, if you take a look at if you're on the video and you take a look, you could see right where the Nile runs, right through the deserts, because there's a bright green. That's where all the farms are, and there's a bright light in the darkness. That's where all the electricity is. It follows the Nile. 100 million Egyptians today live on the Nile. 10 million in the ancient world lived on the Nile. Now, the Nile does something weird. It floods 3 months out of every year. For 3 months, from basically May till September, everything in Egypt is 10 feet underwater. Everything. The Nile floods, it floods every year. Now, this should be terrifying, right? We've dealt with floods in Mesopotamia. Gilgamesh has an entire section of its story with a giant flood that murders everybody. And yet, the Egyptians don't mind the floods. In fact, they like the floods. They think the floods are awesome. Why? Well, it's because it happens every year. It's predictable. It's so predictable, that's the calendar. There's the flood season and the not flood season. And so when it's predictable, you can prepare for it. And so if you know everything is going to be 10 feet on the ground, where do you build your house? Well, you build it 11 feet in the air. So this flooding brings up all this gunk, all this basically fertilizer, and deposits it on all of these farms, which you would think would kill the farm, right? All this gunk. But you plow it under, and it turns out it's excellent fertilizer. And so what the Egyptians got was 3 to 5 harvests a year. The Mesopotamians were lucky to get one. The Mesopotamians, all of Mesopotamia that we talked about, basically existed on 1 harvest a year. The Egyptians get 3 to 5, which means the Egyptians make 3 to 5 times the average income of the average Mesopotamian. Which means what? Which means they have a good life. The average American right now in 2020 makes $50,000. Imagine if you made $150,000 doing the same amount of work. You'd think your job is pretty cool and life is pretty cool. Because you're making the same amount for doing the same, you're making triple the amount for doing the same amount of work. So the Egyptians are rich. Egypt is the richest country in the world, bar none, in the ancient world. It has more food than anybody else. It has more people than anybody else. It has more money than anybody else. And so how do Egyptians feel about life? They like life. They think life is great. You don't have Gilgamesh in Egypt. The pharaohs are nice. The gods are nice. The Nile is great. Money is wonderful. You don't have oh, woe is us. We're being hurt by our king. The gods won't help us. We're being murdered by a flood. None of that happens in Egypt. Life is good. They have nice gods and they have a nice afterlife. Now, their afterlife is so nice, it's exactly their current life. Think about that. When you die as a farmer, you wake up and you're a farmer. And you're happy about that. You're like, yeah, I get to be a farmer forever. That tells you they think life is good. They think Egypt is good. They think the 3 to 5 harvests are good. They think the Nile is good. So that's going to bring us to the Old Kingdom. The Old Kingdom is the first kingdom of ancient Egypt. It's the first unification of Egypt. The conquest of the Nile created unity. It created Egypt in around 3000 or so BC. And what it did was create a country from the delta, from the from the Mediterranean Sea to the first cataract. And that was Egypt. First cataract in the south, the delta, the Mediterranean Sea in the north. And boom, you had one government, one financial system, one legal system, one trade network, one system of laws. You had this unity. And what that did was create the first nation state. And that efficiency of having that kind of unity created wealth. Because now it was efficient. It's like Europe today. You could travel from the first cataract 800 miles north to the delta and buy and sell with anybody. You all spoke more or less the same language. Sure, there's always dialects, but you could understand each other. You had the same weights and measures. So your concept of an ounce was equal to their concept of an ounce. You had the same prices. You had the same money. You had the same laws. You paid the same sales tax. Because there's one king who owns all of that. That's very different than Mesopotamia. In Mesopotamia, every little city is independent, and then Babylon becomes so big it just kind of forces its way on everybody else. You might get some conquering going on, but it never lasts very long in Mesopotamia. So there's no real nation state. There's no country called Mesopotamia. Even Babylon and Babylonia is only a part of the Tigris and Euphrates. So what kind of government do you have in Egypt, in this new Egypt nation state? You have a pharaoh. P-H-A-R-A-O-H. P-H-A-R-A-O-H. And he is different, sometimes it's a she, from a king. And the fact I just told you it could be a she tells you how it's different. This pharaoh is a political leader and a religious leader wrapped up in one. Pharaoh is the greatest job ever created in the history of people, in the history of man. Alexander had 4 or 5 jobs. He was king of Macedon. He was head of the Greek League. He was pharaoh of Egypt. He was king of Persia. And he was general-in-chief of the armies. And he liked being pharaoh the best. So did Mark Antony. So did Caesar. Caesar would much rather have stayed in Egypt than go back home and kind of fight in... Well, when he went back home and fought with the senators, he got murdered. Same with Mark Antony. So, what a pharaoh is supposed to do, his job or her job, since you're a religious leader, women could do it too. You're the God's representative on earth, which gives you godlike powers. So it didn't matter if it was a man or a woman. And your job is to provide stability and prosperity. Both of those are godlike powers. You're supposed to just let things remain the same and help people earn more money. Those are godlike powers. Think about what you pray for. You pray for either stability, please God, please don't let anything bad happen. Okay. Or you pray for prosperity. Please help me win the lotto. Please help me win the lotto. If I win the lotto, I swear I'll give half of it to orphaned children and penguins. I swear. Right? You pray for stability and prosperity. That's godlike powers. And here's a pharaoh who says, I will give it to you. I will make the Nile flood. I will say the words, I will do the dance, and I will burn a goat, and the Niles will flood. And then it does. Well, that pharaoh has power. That pharaoh is the God's homeboy, and by being the God's homeboy, that pharaoh has some special power. It's the way we think of the Pope if you're a Catholic. Yeah, the Pope is a man and a human man, but also a little more than a man and a human man. Like a prayer from the Pope, the Pope lays his hand on you and goes, peace be with you. That is better than if I say peace be with you. You're like, yeah, okay, prof, that's great. But the Pope walks by and gives you a thumb up. You're like, woohoo, God loves me. And that's the pharaoh. Now, you can have stability and prosperity in Egypt because the Nile floods on a regular basis and you're never attacked. You have peace. The old kingdom is never once invaded. Why? Because of the deserts and the cataracts. So the old kingdom never builds an army, never has to build an army. If you tell me a disadvantage of the old kingdom is they didn't have an army, I will mark you wrong on that answer because they didn't need one. So why spend the money on one? Doesn't make any sense. Now, what that means is that's a whole lot of money that can be spent on other things. And we'll talk about what it's going to be spent on in a little bit. But they don't need an army. They're at peace. They're not invaded. They are never, 1,000 years pass and they are never invaded. But all of this prosperity, all of this stability, the never a need for an army creates a problem of legitimacy. Why do we need a pharaoh? Things are great. Things are wonderful. hey, why do we need this guy telling us what to do? So pharaohs have a problem. Their life is too easy. Things are too good. Remember the legitimacy of Mesopotamia. You build walls to keep nomads out, because sooner or later they will come and kill you. Right? You're a military leader. If you're king of Babylon, you're a judge. You're the lawgiver. Right? You're the guy who keeps the peace so that everyone can do their jobs and make all that money. Right? You don't need either one of those in Egypt. You're not being invaded by nomads. And you're all Egyptian, so you don't have all that diversity, all that mixing together, all those people hating on each other. They like each other. They're all Egyptian. And so Pharaoh has a problem. Why do we need a pharaoh? And the answer that the pharaohs will come up with is pyramids. That's the answer. They will build pyramids. Now, people will go, oh, well, aren't they religious structures? Well, yeah, because everything the pharaoh does is religious. Aren't they economic structures? Well, a little bit, because everything pharaoh does is economic, because he's going to spend a lot of money on this. But ultimately, what they are is symbols of legitimacy. The only person who can build a pyramid, who has the money to build a pyramid, who has the power to build a pyramid, is an Egyptian pharaoh. Nobody else in the ancient world builds them. You have some personal ones in Kush. And when we talk about Africa, we'll talk about those. But that tells you that the Kushites had a relationship. Kushite kings and noblemen had a relationship with Egypt through trade. And so they see the pyramids, they come back and they're like, I want to build one. And then they build a personal one. And it's tiny. It's just big enough for it's like basically your bedroom in a pyramid form. You put your dead body in it. You put your cat. You put a couple other things in it. It's bigger than the mausoleums that you might see in the old school cemeteries of Philly or New York, where the rich people built a little pyramid to themselves. But you're talking maybe 25 feet high, 15 feet high, 20 feet wide. Not Khufu, And so pyramids are going to be used for legitimacy. How? Why and how? Well, the pharaoh has money. Being king of the richest country on earth gives you money. And people have time. This is the thing that people forget, is for 3 months out of the year, you didn't work. Because everything was 10 feet underwater. Gentlemen, ladies, it was the greatest excuse. It was the greatest holiday ever. Nobody could look at you and say, why aren't you working? You're like, dude, have you taken a look out your window? Everything's underwater. There is nothing to do, which tells you how rich Egypt is. They made triple the amount of Mesopotamia in 9 months' time. In 2/3 of the time, they got 3 months off. And still made triple. You can imagine why people were jealous of Egypt. So the people have time. They're just hanging out. They're doing their thing. And so what the pharaoh does is knock on the door. Hello, I'm from the Pharaoh Construction Company, and we would like to hire your husband to come out into the desert where the floods don't reach, and hang out for 3 months doing manly work in the sun for a good pay. And what do people say to that? They say, yeah, sure, yeah. The husbands get away from their wives and their kids. Because even though you get 3 months off, you're not going to be able to sit there and play Madden and your Xbox for 3 months. You're going to have to do stuff like clean dirty diapers. All those things that you used to say, honey, I can't do it. I have to go out and farm. I have work to do. Now, you have to do them. And let's face it, ladies. Do you really want your man sitting around on the couch eating Cheetos and scratching himself? Or would you rather him going out, doing some manly stuff, making some money that he could spend on you? Exactly. And so Pharaoh gets the people. He's willing to pay well to get pyramids built during the summer floods, and that equals legitimacy. All right, well, now that we're going to build a pyramid, what are we going to build? Well, we're going to build the biggest effing pyramid we can build, the biggest forking pyramid available. I'm going to take all the money I can make, hire all the people I can get all the food I need, get all the entertainment I need, and I am going to spend as long as I can to build the biggest pyramid possible. So size matters. The size of your pyramid matters, gentlemen. Don't let anybody ever tell you it doesn't. It does. Think about it. When someone sees your pyramid for the first time, what do you want their reaction to be? Do you want their reaction to be, wow, oh my, that's amazing. I can't believe I have never seen anything like that in all of my life. This is the great, whoa, oh, wow. Or do you want their reaction to be, oh, that's cute. It's so cute. It's so little. It's cute. Oh, I love it. It's so tiny. That's amazing. It's so, I will have to tell all my friends about how little and cute it is. Think about it, gentlemen. Which one do you want? Why? Why do you want the former? Why do you want the, oh my God, I've never seen something so ginormous in all my life? Why? Because of what it stands for, because of what it represents. No pyramid does its job any better than any other pyramid. They're all the same in terms of doing their job, of getting their job done. The bigger pyramids don't do a better job than the smaller pyramids. But people think they're better because what it does is it represents betterness. How? Well, it means a better king. Why? Because that king had to get that stone, had to get more stone, more people who worked more time. Remember, he only has 3 months. The pharaoh only has 3 months. Then everybody goes home. And then work stops. It's like summer camp. You have 3 months of crazy cool stuff happening at summer camp. And then September 1st happens and everyone goes home. The summer camp doesn't disappear. It's still there for the next 9 months. But nothing happens. There's a little maintenance and there's a little, there's a couple people making sure everything's there and there's some setting up and there's some maintenance. But nothing really happens. And then June comes and all the kids show up and boom, summer camp happens again. And that's the pyramids. For 9 months, nothing happens because everybody else is working. And then boom, the floods come. The Pharaoh Construction Company hirers go out. They send it out on LinkedIn and Monster.com and 10, 20, 50, 100,000 people show up. So the bigger your pyramid means the better king you are because you can harness those materials and those resources and you can afford them. So it means you're a richer king. 2, you have more people working on them because you only have a limited amount of time. So Khufu has the biggest pyramid at Giza, Giza. Now, you know nothing about Khufu, and that's okay. But the one thing you now know is he has the biggest pyramid at Giza. So is he a good king or a bad king? Is he a strong king or a weak king? Is he do the people like Khufu or did his people hate Khufu? You know the answers just by the size of his pyramid to all those questions. So Khufu, Khufu, was able to hire 100,000 people every year. They kept showing up, which means they like him. So you have more people working on your pyramid to build a bigger pyramid. You have more resources required, simple stone. And then you need food, then you need entertainment, then you need the pay. Right? Khufu's pyramid is 485 feet tall. That's about 50 stories tall. That's a modern skyscraper. To understand how impressive Khufu's pyramid is, the man or woman who put that last stone at the top, who finally fitted in that last top stone and sanded it off and made it all nice. When that person stood up, straddled that pyramid and looked down and looked out across Egypt, that person was the tallest person on a man-made structure for the next 4,000 years. I hope that person enjoyed the view, because nobody else had a view like that for 4,000 years. Not till the medieval world started to build tall churches out of stone and concrete. That's how big that was. Even the Romans don't have anything that big. 4,000. That person, that one person looking out went, this is nice. And then they started to climb down. That was the tallest person on Earth on a man-made structure for the next 4,000 years. The tallest thing built in Mesopotamia was 75 feet tall. 7 stories. 7 to 8 stories. And that's the Hanging Gardens of Babylon. And they're super tall for Mesopotamia. Why? Remember that Mesopotamia is a fishbowl. The Tigris and Euphrates are above the farmland that people lived on. And Nebuchadnezzar, the Babylonian king, had a wife who was a Persian, who is Median. She was used to the mountains. She was used to the highlands, to the high plateau. And so she's living in this fishbowl, and she's like, these sunsets suck. The skies suck. I can't see anything. There's earth above me everywhere I look. And so he wanted, out of love, he built the Hanging Gardens of Babylon so that she would have, one, green, but also be able to see a sunset, able to see the horizon. So he built the tallest thing you could build in Mesopotamia so you could see over the rivers. And that was 75 feet. 1/7 the size of a pyramid that is 1,000 years older. 2,000 years older, I should say. And finally, fourth, it means you were king longer. You had to have lived a long life as king. No one murdered you, and you lived a long life as king. Khufu was king for 20 years. Why? Well, everybody wants a pyramid, and the moment that you die, like, nobody wants to keep working on your pyramid. The person who comes next, your son, your brother, your cousin, is going to want to start working on their pyramid. And so what they do is just kind of like finish your pyramid. Like, and you'll see like weird pyramids. They're going. They look like they're going to be huge, and then boop, there's a top on them, kind of thing. And that's the son. The pharaoh died, and the son went, all right, I need a couple of years to get my pyramid ready, to get the architects and get everybody ready and up and running on mine. So just finish dad's. Like, you would be a bad son if you didn't finish your dad's. But you're not going to spend a lot of money and time and resources finishing your dad's, because then your dad gets the reputation for having the awesome pyramid, not you. You see how this works? You'd be a bad son if you didn't finish it, but that doesn't mean you have to put a lot of effort into finishing it either. So you just kind of, boom, get it done. So Khufu finished his own pyramid, which means he was in charge for 20-something years. What is the advantage of this? It touches everybody. It's easy legitimacy. 100,000 people times 20 years is 2 million people worked on these pyramids. 20 years is 2 generations. People who started working on the pyramids as young men in their teens were working on Khufu's pyramid as old men with their teenage sons by the end of it. So it bound people together. It makes Pharaoh look good. People get money in their pocket. They got good food. They got great entertainment. So they come walking home and they're like, Pharaoh is awesome. When you get your paycheck, you're like, Pharaoh is awesome. And then you go home. And this is a part that people don't quite understand. You go home to your wife. And is your wife happy? Sure, yeah, she is. Why? Because who comes walking down the street up the block? But her husband, who has spent 3 months, 90 days, working 8 to 12 hours a day in doing heavy, manual, manly work in the sun. So who comes up walking up that walk? Not her schlubby, kind of portly, kind of chubby, husband, but a rock god. A man with bristly muscles, hard abs, and he's brown. He's got an awesome tan. And he's got money in his pocket that he can't wait to spend on you. Because for 3 months, he's had all his needs taken care of, so he's cool. So the advantage is everybody loves the pharaoh. What's the disadvantage? The obvious. It's monumentally expensive to do this. Hugely expensive. Nobody else can afford this. This is why no one else builds pyramids this way. Nobody else, no other civilization builds pyramids that is only used for a sarcophagus, that's only used for legitimacy. Other people will build pyramids, but as tall entertainment platforms, as religious platforms, as a way to broadcast out to large numbers of people. But as a useful thing just for one person, nobody does this. Because it's too expensive. And you have to have all of that money up front. Because everyone has to get paid. All of those food vendors have to get paid up front. All of the entertainers have to get paid. You have to make sure there's no credit in the ancient world. So you have to make sure you have the cash to pay 100,000 people all at once. You need an immense amount of money. So what happens to the Old Kingdom? Well, the pyramids actually caused the fall of the Old Kingdom. Why? Well, because if you want something done right, you have to do it yourself, which makes the pharaoh builder and chief. Because if the pyramid falls down, if the pyramid is bad, if people don't get paid, he looks bad, and pharaoh can't look bad. This is the whole point of legitimacy. People have to leave saying pharaoh is awesome. So all of the pharaoh's time and mental concentration is going to go into the pyramids. He's going to be pyramid builder in chief. The problem with that is things still need to get done. He's still the government. Trash has to be picked up. Streets have to be cleaned. Fences have to be mended. And so what he does is he goes to his nobility and says, "Hey, homeboys, can you help me out? Can you do the job for me?" And they say, "Yeah, of course, we're your besties. We're your BFFs, we're your homies. We will help you out, no problem, but we need more money to do so. Not for me, not for pay, but to work to do the gears. I have to pay people to fix the fences. I have to pay people to clean the park. I have to pay all of these people to do things. So can you please increase my budget?" And the pharaoh says, "Of course I can. Here's the check. Here you go, here you go, here you go, here you go." And so money is going out to all of these people who are doing things for the pharaoh so that the pharaoh can build his pyramids. But that means, one, there's less money for the pharaoh to build his pyramid. So what happens to the size of his pyramids? They get smaller because he hires less people, because he can afford less stone. The second thing is legitimacy moves from the pharaoh to the nobility. The pharaoh's importance fades. Because one, less people being hired to build pyramids, but two, if you have a problem and you need it fixed, dog poop in the park, you don't call pharaoh anymore. You call the local nobleman. Even if you called pharaoh like you did in the age of Khufu, you get a message and it's like, "Hello, thank you for calling pharaoh. We're not in right now. Please type in the first 4 letters of your local nobleman's last name, and we will patch you into his number. Thank you. Call again." And that's what happens. So the local people start going, "Pharaoh's nice, but he's not fixing my problems. The local noble guy is fixing my problems, so I'll go to him." So legitimacy moves to the local nobility. And what happens is a pharaoh dies. and there isn't a replacement. And nobody cared. Nobody cared because the nobleman was doing all the jobs. Now, what the nobleman will realize is Pharaoh is an awesome job. And when a bunch of noblemen realize, one, Pharaoh is an awesome job, and two, there is no Pharaoh, what they decide all at once is, I could be the Pharaoh. And so what they have is a civil war between the nobility. And that's what's called the first intermediate period. And that first intermediate period is won by the Prince of Thebes, the nobleman of Thebes, which is the farthest south city in Egypt. Why did they win? Well, they had the African trade connection. They were the place African trade came to first. They're at the first cataract. The trade comes in, the African merchants dump their stuff, make all their money, buy all the stuff they need, pay all the sales tax, and then head back south into Africa. Which meant the princes of Thebes had a financial advantage. That doesn't matter until they turned to the African merchants and said, hey, how many mercenaries, how many African mercenaries can I buy with what you just paid me, with what I just paid you, or what we just did? And they're like, oh, we could probably buy 1,000. How about this? Instead of you paying me for the stuff you're going to buy, go hire 1,000 mercenaries, soldiers, and bring them back. And, you know, if you happen to save some money on that, you could keep it. The African merchants say, that's great. I'll be back in a couple months. They go, they hire a bunch of mercenaries, because the African kingdoms are fighting all the time. Because they're normal kingdoms. Remember, Egypt is weird by having all this peace. Everybody else fights all the time. So the African kingdoms are good at war. So African mercenaries are plentiful. They're happy to go to work. They get to beat up on Egyptians who have no experience of war. This is like beating up Ralph Macchio before he becomes a Karate Kid. Who wouldn't? So they go up, they get hired by the Prince of Thebes, they get paid real well, and they turned into a military advantage. So the Prince of Thebes' financial advantage by having a monopoly on trade with Africa turned into a military advantage. He could hire the most African mercenaries. He could then beat up the other nobles and create the Middle Kingdom. And in our next episode, we will talk about the Middle Kingdom and the New Kingdom. Thank you.